The antique mirror had been in my family for as long as I could remember. It was a grand, ornate piece with intricate carvings and a frame that seemed to whisper secrets of bygone eras. As a child, I'd often heard the stories, whispers of curses and dark reflections, tales of people who had seen things in that mirror that defied explanation. But I was never one for superstition. To me, it was just an old, dusty relic of my family's past. That all changed one ordinary evening. I'd just come home from a long day at work, exhaustion weighing heavily on my shoulders. The house was quiet, eerily still, as if it was holding its breath. As I walked past the mirror in the hallway, I stopped. The reflection seemed different. My own face stared back at me, but something was off. The smile that played on my lips was not reflected in the glass. Instead, my mirror image grinned wider, the expression growing disturbingly sinister. I laughed it off as fatigue and stress playing tricks on my mind. But when the lights flickered and a cold draft whispered through the hallway, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That night, as I lay in bed, trying to shake off the unease, I glanced toward the mirror on the opposite wall. The shadowy figure in the glass was moving, shifting, as though it had a life of its own. I turned on the lamp, but the darkness seemed to cling to the mirror, refusing to be banished. I tried to dismiss it, to tell myself it was just my imagination, but sleep eluded me. I watched in horror as the shadow grew more defined, taking on a shape, an almost human figure that seemed to breathe and shift within the confines of the glass. My heart raced, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. And then came the tapping, a soft, rhythmic sound, like someone gently rapping on a window. I turned, my breath catching in my throat, and there it was, a pale hand pressing against the inside of the mirror, as if trying to break free from its glass prison. My world tilted, the terror of that night wrapping around me like a suffocating shroud. The mirror wasn't just reflecting me, it was holding something captive, something that was now desperate to escape. That was just the beginning. As the nights went on, the tapping grew louder, the figure more insistent. I could feel its eyes on me, following me, watching my every move. I knew then that the stories weren't just stories. The mirror held something dark, something that would never let me go. If you're a fan of real-life horror stories and macabre experiences that defy logic, you're in the right place. On our channel, you'll find spine-tingling accounts told in the first person, stories that will keep you up at night, and mysteries that will send shivers down your spine. So, if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss one of our terrifying videos. Join our community of horror enthusiasts and get ready to explore the darkest corners of reality. Now, turn off the lights, get comfortable, and prepare yourself for the nightmare that awaits. Let's begin. I've always prided myself on being a rational person. The type who scoffs at ghost stories, rolls their eyes at curses, and thinks superstitions are just relics of the past. So, when I inherited my grandmother's house, along with all of its old-world charm and antique furniture, I wasn't bothered by the presence of a particular mirror. It was massive, easily 7 feet tall, with an ornate, gold-leaf frame covered in intricate, swirling designs that curled like vines up the sides. It sat right in the center of the hallway, a place it had occupied for as long as anyone in my family could remember. I'd heard the whispers growing up, tales of bad luck, strange happenings, reflections that didn't quite match reality. My grandmother, in her later years, had even warned me to cover it at night. "It sees more than you want it to," she'd say with a far-off look in her eyes. I'd always laughed, brushing it off as nothing more than an old woman's ramblings. But now, as the new owner of the house, the mirror was mine. I passed by it every day without a second thought. It was just a piece of glass in a frame, nothing more. That Thursday evening, after a long, grueling day at work, I was tired, exhausted. My mind felt like mush, and my body was begging for the relief of my bed or at least the comfort of the couch. As I trudged through the hallway, barely paying attention, I felt an odd sensation, like a pull, a slight tug at the corner of my awareness. I stopped. My feet rooted themselves to the hardwood floor, the soft creaking of the old boards beneath me the only sound in the house. For some reason, I found myself drawn back to the mirror. It was a feeling I couldn't shake, a creeping unease I couldn't quite explain, like the sensation you get when someone's watching you but no one's there. Slowly, I turned my head, my gaze locking onto the glass. At first, everything looked normal. There I was, staring back at myself, my reflection slightly dim in the evening light. My eyes were ringed with exhaustion, and my hair was a tangled mess from running my fingers through it all day. My posture slumped with fatigue. But then, something made me narrow my eyes, something subtle, almost imperceptible at first. My reflection was smiling. It wasn't just a small smile, either. It was a wide, unnatural grin that stretched across my face in a way that sent a jolt of cold shock through my chest. But here's the thing, I wasn't smiling. My own lips, in real life, were pressed together in a tired, neutral line, while the reflection smile grew wider. Too wide. A sickening sense of wrongness settled over me. My breath caught in my throat as I took a hesitant step closer to the mirror, my pulse quickening. I stared, trying to convince myself that it was just a trick of the light, some sort of distortion in the glass. But no matter how hard I tried to rationalize it, the smile persisted, curling upwards, pulling my reflection's cheeks into a grotesque, almost predatory shape. As I moved closer, I could see the minute details, my own skin, pale under the dim hallway light, my reflection's eyes gleaming with something that was definitely not fatigue. And that smile. God, that smile. It kept growing, stretching beyond the limits of what should have been possible, twisting my face into something inhuman, something wrong. I blinked, my heart now hammering in my chest. For a moment, I considered touching the glass, as if making contact would somehow shatter the illusion. But before I could move, my reflection did something that made the blood in my veins turn to ice. It raised its hand, and waved. My entire body went cold. My breath caught in my throat, and I stood there, frozen, staring at myself, or rather, at this thing in the mirror that was no longer me. My hand hadn't moved, hadn't twitched, but the reflection's fingers wiggled in a slow, taunting gesture, as if mocking my paralysis. The smile on its face, my face, grew impossibly wider, and I could feel my knees threatening to buckle beneath me. I took a step back, instinctively trying to put distance between myself and the mirror. My reflection, however, did the opposite. It moved forward, pressing its body against the glass, palms flat against the inside as though testing the surface for weaknesses, its eyes never leaving mine. The air around me felt heavier, thick with an oppressive, suffocating energy that seemed to crawl up my skin. My pulse pounded in my ears, and every muscle in my body screamed at me to move, to get out, but my feet felt glued to the floor. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could do was watch as this twisted version of myself pressed harder against the glass, that unnerving smile never faltering. I don't know what snapped me out of it, but suddenly, my body lurched into action. I spun on my heel and bolted down the hallway, my heart racing in pure terror. I could feel its presence behind me, feel the weight of its gaze even though I didn't dare look back. I threw myself into my bedroom, slamming the door behind me and locking it with shaking hands. My chest heaved as I backed away, the silence of the house pressing down on me like a lead blanket. But then, just as I thought I was safe, I heard it. A soft, rhythmic tapping. Coming from the mirror in my bedroom. The tapping was soft at first, almost delicate, like raindrops hitting a window. But as I stood there, rooted to the spot in my bedroom, it grew louder. Tap, tap, tap. Each knock sent a jolt through my body, vibrating through my bones. My eyes darted to the source of the sound, another mirror. This one was smaller, propped up on the dresser near the corner of the room, reflecting the dim glow of the bedside lamp. I didn't want to look. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to ignore it, to hide under the covers like a terrified child. But the pull was irresistible, like a slow-motion car crash you can't tear your eyes away from. Slowly, almost against my will, I turned my head toward the mirror. And there it was. The same twisted version of me stared back from the glass, only now it was different. The smile was gone, replaced by an expression that was, almost hungry. Its eyes locked onto mine with a strange, dark intensity, and I felt a wave of nausea roll over me. My reflection's fingers drummed against the inside of the mirror, each tap perfectly in sync with the pounding in my chest. My heart was racing, my breath shallow and rapid. I couldn't think straight, everything felt disjointed, like I was seeing the world through a fog. My mind was screaming at me that this wasn't real, that this was just some trick of exhaustion, of stress, of too much caffeine. But deep down, I knew. I knew that whatever was happening was far beyond the realm of rational explanation. I backed away from the dresser, my eyes never leaving the reflection. It moved with me, perfectly mirroring my retreat but with an eerie smoothness, like it was gliding, not walking. I could hear my pulse in my ears, a frantic thudding that only seemed to get louder as the room seemed to close in around me. My back hit the wall, and I jolted, snapping out of my trance for a moment. I needed to get out of here, away from this thing, away from this room, away from the mirrors. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers trembling so badly I could barely unlock the screen. I dialed the first number that came to mind, my friend Rachel. As the dial tone echoed in the silence of the room, I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the growing feeling of dread that seemed to be creeping in from all sides. The sound of the tapping had stopped, replaced by an eerie stillness. For a brief moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, it was over. But then I heard it. A soft creak, like the sound of a door slowly being pushed open. My eyes shot open, and my stomach dropped. The mirror on the dresser was shaking. Just a little at first, but enough to send a chill crawling up my spine. The glass began to tremble as if something on the other side was pressing against it, trying to force its way through. My phone was still ringing, the tone echoing in the room, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the mirror. The reflection of myself, of that thing, was pressing harder against the glass now, its palms flat against the surface, pushing as though the mirror was no longer solid but something it could break through. I could see the strain in its face, the way its features twisted with effort, that sick grin slowly creeping back across its face. Come on, pick up, I whispered, my voice barely more than a breath as I stared at the mirror, willing Rachel to answer. Finally, there was a click. Relief flooded through me as I heard her voice on the other end of the line. Hello? Emma? Are you okay? But before I could say anything, the mirror let out a sharp crack, like the sound of ice breaking underfoot. My entire body stiffened, my mouth going dry. I watched in horror as a thin, jagged line appeared in the glass, snaking its way across the surface. My reflection's hands were still pressed against the inside, but now its face was closer, so close that I could see every unnatural detail. The stretched skin, the sunken eyes, the teeth. Teeth that were too sharp. The crack deepened, spreading across the mirror like a spiderweb, and with it came a soft, rhythmic sound. Tap, tap, tap. But this time, it wasn't coming from the mirror. It was coming from the other side of the bedroom. I whipped my head around, my heart nearly leaping out of my chest. The full-length mirror on the closet door was rattling now, shaking in its frame, as though something was pounding against it from the inside. And then, as I stood there, paralyzed with terror, the closet door began to creak open. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened, every muscle in my body frozen as I watched the closet door inch open. The rattling mirror on its surface trembled violently now, like something on the other side was trying to force its way through. The tapping, soft, rhythmic, relentless, echoed in my head, filling the room with a sickening sense of anticipation. I gripped my phone tighter, my knuckles white, but my hand was trembling so hard I could barely keep hold of it. Rachel's voice crackled through the speaker, distant, concerned. Emma? Are you there? Emma, what's going on? But I couldn't answer. I couldn't move. My eyes were locked on the closet, on the mirror that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. Then, the door opened a few inches wider. My breath hitched. The darkness inside was thick, impenetrable, like it was swallowing all the light in the room. And that's when I saw it, just a glimpse, at first. A hand. Pale, thin, with fingers that were too long, unnaturally slender, creeping out from behind the closet door. It curled around the edge of the wood, the fingernails jagged and blackened, scratching lightly against the surface as it pushed the door open further. I stumbled backward, my body finally snapping into action. My back hit the dresser, and the mirror above it rattled loudly. I glanced up, and my reflection was still there. That thing was still there, grinning at me, its eyes glinting with a sick, twisted glee. It mimicked my panic, mocking my fear with exaggerated movements, as though it found all of this funny. The phone slipped from my grasp, clattering to the floor. Rachel's voice was still there, muffled and distant, but I couldn't focus on it anymore. My entire world had narrowed to the closet, to the hand now fully extending out into the room. Then came another. This one grasped the edge of the mirror, pulling itself up like it was climbing out from inside. My heart pounded in my chest so loudly I thought it might burst. I stumbled backward toward the bed, my legs barely holding me up, as something began to emerge from the dark space of the closet. It wasn't me, not really, but it looked like me. A distorted version, its limbs too long, its body thin and gaunt, with skin stretched tight over sharp bones. Its head tilted unnaturally to one side, the grin on its face growing impossibly wide, showing rows of jagged, yellow teeth that seemed to glisten in the dim light. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My mind refused to accept it, to comprehend that something so grotesque, so wrong, was standing there, slowly crawling out of the mirror. I tried to scream, but the sound caught in my throat, coming out as a choked whimper. It stood there, hunched, its twisted form towering over the room, its eyes, my eyes, locked onto mine. They were dark, bottomless, filled with something that went beyond hunger. It was like looking into the void itself. And then it moved, quickly, too quickly, taking a step toward me, its hand reaching out. I scrambled backward, my body screaming in terror, but my movements were clumsy, frantic. My legs caught on the edge of the bed, and I fell onto the mattress, my hands grasping at the sheets as I tried to push myself away, to put any distance between me and that thing. But it kept coming. The tapping resumed, louder this time, more insistent. It was everywhere now, echoing from the mirror on the dresser, from the closet, from the glass on the walls. The sound of something trying to break free. I gasped for air, crawling backward up the bed, my eyes darting between the creature in front of me and the mirrors that seemed to close in around me, suffocating me. Everywhere I looked, it was there, I was there. My twisted reflection, moving independently, inching closer, its grin growing wider with every step. I couldn't escape. I was surrounded. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might pass out, my vision blurring at the edges as the tapping grew louder, faster, almost frantic. The creature was at the foot of the bed now, its long fingers curling around the edge of the mattress, the nails digging into the fabric with a slow, deliberate scrape. "Stop!" I screamed, finally finding my voice, but it came out weak, desperate. My mind was spinning, every fiber of my being consumed with fear. It was like the walls themselves were closing in, the mirrors warping and shifting, all of them reflecting that thing, all of them mocking me. And then it spoke. At first, it was just a whisper, so soft I almost didn't catch it. But then the words became clearer, raspy and broken, like they hadn't been used in a long, long time. "You can't run." The voice was mine, but it wasn't me. It was distorted, stretched, twisted just like everything else about that nightmare version of myself. And then, with terrifying speed, it lunged. My mind raced, my vision spinning as I tried to process the terror before me. The creature, the twisted version of myself, was closing in, its long fingers reaching out with a disturbing, deliberate slowness. The bed creaked under my weight as I scrambled backward, desperately trying to get away from it. The room felt like it was shrinking, the mirrors surrounding me amplifying the nightmare. The thing on the bed reached out, its fingers like skeletal claws, grazing the edge of the mattress. I could feel its icy presence even before its hand touched me, a coldness that seeped through the sheets and wrapped around my ankles. I tried to kick, to pull away, but it was as if my limbs were trapped in quicksand. Every movement felt sluggish, every effort drained by the weight of sheer terror. My eyes darted around the room, desperately searching for an escape. The closet door had fully opened now, and the space inside seemed to pulse with a dark, malevolent energy. Shadows danced and flickered, as if the closet itself was alive, breathing with a hungry anticipation. I needed to get out. I needed to escape this nightmare before it consumed me completely. I turned to the bedroom door, hoping that somehow, getting out of this room would be enough. But when I tried to stand, my legs felt like lead, and my head spun with dizziness. The thing on the bed moved closer, its twisted face only inches away from mine. I could see every grotesque detail now, the sunken eyes, the teeth that looked like they could tear through flesh with ease. Its grin was a horrible mockery of my own, a reflection of every fear and insecurity I had ever felt. The soft, mocking whisper came again, this time louder, echoing around the room. "You can't hide." The tapping from the mirrors grew louder, a cacophony of sound that seemed to shake the very walls of the room. The creature's breath was cold on my face, and I could feel its rancid, foul odor. My skin crawled, and I recoiled, but there was nowhere to go. The mirrors were everywhere, reflecting the horror, multiplying it. Desperation took over. I grabbed the nearest object, a lamp on the bedside table, and swung it at the creature. The lamp shattered against its arm, the glass and metal scattering across the floor. The thing flinched, but its grin never wavered. It was as if the physical pain didn't register with it. I scrambled off the bed, making a break for the bedroom door. My movements were frantic, fueled by sheer terror. I yanked the door open, the hinges squealing in protest. I bolted into the hallway, my heart racing as I sprinted towards the staircase. Behind me, I could hear the creature scrambling off the bed, its footsteps echoing ominously. As I reached the top of the stairs, I glanced back. The hallway was a blur of shadows and flickering lights, the mirrors lining the walls reflecting the terror I was trying to escape. The creature's silhouette was visible in the distance, its form dark and menacing against the glow of the hallway lights. I dashed down the stairs, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My feet pounded against the wooden steps, each thud echoing through the empty house. I could hear the thing gaining on me, its breaths harsh and labored, its footsteps a chilling reminder that it was still there, still pursuing me. The front door was just ahead. If I could reach it, if I could get outside, I might be able to escape this nightmare. I reached for the door handle, my fingers trembling uncontrollably. I turned it, yanking the door open, and stumbled out into the cool night air. I didn't stop to look back. I ran down the steps, across the lawn, and into the street, my heart pounding so hard I could barely think. The darkness of the night was a stark contrast to the terror I had left behind, and I kept running until my legs could carry me no further. Eventually, I collapsed on the sidewalk, gasping for breath, my body racked with sobs. The silence of the night enveloped me, a welcome reprieve from the horrors of the house. I looked back, expecting to see the creature or hear the tapping, but there was nothing. The house was dark, still, almost peaceful. But even as I sat there, trying to calm my racing heart, I knew that the nightmare wasn't over. The mirrors, the thing in the bedroom, they were still there, waiting, watching. And no matter how far I ran, I had a sinking feeling that the reflection would always find a way to come back. I don't know how long I sat there on the sidewalk, the cool night air biting at my skin, my mind still reeling from the horrors I'd left behind. Every shadow seemed to hold the promise of that twisted creature, every sound made me jump, convinced it was following me. My breaths came in ragged gasps, and my eyes darted around, scanning for any sign of the terror I had barely escaped. Eventually, the noise of passing cars and distant streetlights began to ground me back in reality. I fumbled for my phone, still lying on the lawn where I dropped it. My fingers were numb and shaking, but I managed to dial Rachel's number again. This time, she picked up almost immediately. "Emma, where are you? What's happening?" Her voice was frantic, filled with concern. I'm outside," I stammered, my voice trembling. "At the curb. I don't know what's going on, but there's something in my house. It's coming from the mirrors." My words faltered, and I choked on a sob. "It's trying to get me." "Stay where you are." "I'm coming over," Rachel said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Just stay put. I'm on my way." I hung up, trying to steady my breathing. The darkness of the night felt safer than the house, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was only a temporary reprieve. The house stood there in the distance, dark and silent, its windows like vacant eyes staring back at me. Every once in a while, I thought I saw a flicker of movement behind those windows, a hint of something shifting in the gloom, but when I looked closer, it was always just my imagination. As I waited, the night grew colder, and the anxiety gnawing at me made the chill feel even more intense. My eyes kept darting toward the house, as if expecting the creature to burst out at any moment. The longer I sat there, the more I began to question if my escape had been real, or if it was just another part of the nightmare. Rachel arrived within what felt like an eternity, her headlights cutting through the darkness. I scrambled to my feet, stumbling toward her car as she pulled up. Her face was etched with concern as she jumped out and rushed to my side. "Emma, are you okay? What happened?" she asked, pulling me into a tight embrace. Her warmth was a small comfort against the cold fear that gripped me. "I don't know," I whispered, shivering. "I don't know if I'm okay. My voice broke, and I struggled to hold back the tears. There was something in the mirrors. It looked like me, but it wasn't. It was trying to get out." Rachel's eyes widened with worry, but she didn't question me further. Instead, she guided me into the car, and I slumped into the passenger seat, wrapping my arms around myself as if to fend off the lingering fear. She drove us away from the house, the headlights slicing through the darkness, but the sense of dread didn't fade. It clung to me like a shadow, refusing to let go. When we finally arrived at Rachel's place, she helped me inside and settled me on the couch. She made tea and tried to comfort me with gentle words and warm blankets, but the terror was too deeply rooted. I couldn't shake the feeling that the nightmare was far from over. I barely slept that night, my mind replaying the events over and over. I kept seeing the reflection in my mind's eye, the twisted, hungry grin, the way it had crawled out of the mirror, reaching for me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those eyes, my eyes, staring back at me, filled with an inhuman malice. As the first light of dawn broke through the window, I knew I had to return to the house. I had to see if it was still there, if the creature had truly been a figment of my imagination, or if it had somehow made its way into the world beyond the mirrors. But the thought of going back filled me with an icy dread. I didn't want to face it again, didn't want to see what had become of my home, my sanctuary. Rachel insisted on coming with me, and despite my protests, I was grateful for her support. Together, we drove back to the house, and as we approached, I could see that it was just as dark and silent as before. The front lawn was still littered with the remnants of the night's chaos, my phone, my scattered belongings. We entered the house cautiously, the air heavy with the scent of stale fear. The mirrors seemed to watch us as we moved through the rooms, each reflection taunting me with memories of what had happened. We made our way to the bedroom, where the creature had first emerged. The room was eerily still, the bed empty, the closet door closed. I approached the closet door with a mixture of dread and determination. I opened it slowly, half expecting the creature to burst out at me. But the closet was empty. The mirror that had once rattled now stood in place, unbroken, reflecting the room with unsettling calm. Rachel checked the mirrors around the house, but everything seemed normal, as if the night's horrors had never happened. But I knew better. I could still feel the lingering presence, the sense that something was watching me from behind the glass. As we left the house, I glanced back one last time. The mirrors were just mirrors, ordinary reflections of the world. Or so they seemed. But I knew that I could never truly escape the terror they held, the way they had twisted reality into something unrecognizable. I left the house behind, but the fear remained with me, a constant, chilling reminder that some nightmares never really end. The mirrors might be empty, but the memory of that night would stay with me forever, a haunting echo of the terror that lurked just behind the glass.